Excellent.
Oh, sorry. You want to be higher, right?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So I want to set the stage a little bit. Digital is such a big thing. We're all here thinking about where to spend marketing budgets. Everyone's thinking about spending lots of money online, Instagram. It's a whole big thing. In fact, as fashion businesses, you guys are all really, media businesses when it comes down to it. Everything you're doing is really curated, the entire experience. And so we have a really interesting panel here that I think is going to provide a lot of insight from different points of views. We have someone talking about, Caroline's going to talk a little bit about digital and print and the different ways in which we can think about pitching and what content works. Susan's going to talk a little bit about why retail stores are amazing and why retail business is certainly thriving. And so if you're thinking about doing both e-commerce and doing wholesale, it's definitely something to be considered. And lastly, Mariana's going to talk about all the amazing things that are happening with digital and really the kind of KPIs, right? So we have a really interesting mix. But the most important thing that I'm going to want to find out from you guys is, what is really evolving and how are consumers ultimately making purchasing decisions? In my perspective, I've always found that it really takes about 6 different customer touch points in order to really close the sale, create engagement, create that brand story. And those 6 touch points can be so many different things. So, Caroline, why don't you tell us a little bit about customer touch points and what you're thinking about this print stuff, this digital, how do we make sense of it?
Well, as far as the touch points, I think the way that I guess to give you some context, I work at W Magazine, but I started on the print side and I focused on emerging designers while I was on the print side. And then in September I moved over to the website and now I cover all of fashion, but I kind of specialize in our market and shopping stories, as well as styling. But what we've noticed as far as engagement with our content and the shopping stories we do is that people kind of need to see a certain item or specific trend multiple times before they're really willing to make a purchase or engage. So for us, it might be like a shopping story on our website, someone else's Instagram, maybe even seeing it in another print magazine, maybe seeing their friend wear it. But we usually notice that it's we say four touch points that people kind of have to engage with the product before they're willing to buy.
Awesome. And so coming from the retail side of things, I love having Susan here because I feel like she's my brick and mortar advocate. And retail is such a big community driver. So how do you see your consumers? Obviously you guys give little bios about yourselves, but how do you see your consumers kind of moving between these worlds?
Wow. Okay. Well, my name is Susan Domelsmith. I'm the manager in the Meagher for Henrik Vibskov boutique. And for those of you who don't know, Henrik is he's a Scandinavian designer based in Copenhagen, and he's also an artist and musician, and he has all of these different facets to his work. So yeah, we've had our store in Soho for the past 6 years, so I've really seen the neighborhood evolve, and we've been doing better than ever. And I was just looking at the numbers earlier today, and we're this year we've done 35 to 20% better than any other year we have in the past.
Holy bananas!
That's actually very good. You have to let it pop out. Hello.
Anyways, actually today's our 6th anniversary, our 6th-year birthday. So yeah, it's nice to be able to see the whole process evolve. But yeah, it's we are interacting with customers in a new way, but I really do see brick and mortar as kind of a social experiment. It's really good for the community. I have also a lot of clients who come in and maybe they don't have that much social interaction, and so whenever they come in, they're really excited to talk to us about fashion and know what our expertise is, and also just trust our instincts and know, okay, I'm going to this event. I really want to look good. I know I need to go somewhere where people are experts, and I know I need to be able to trust them. And so putting, their appearance in our hands is also really nice. But I do see like two different aspects that's really thriving, because there are a lot of empty storefronts in Soho. There's about a third of the spaces that aren't unoccupied at the moment, and we somehow are doing super well. So I think it's a lot to do. It's not just, it's more about like the personalization of the store, and also being able to interact with people who you trust. And just, I don't know, it's like a community center in a way. And also, we're more of a gallery. Like, we have a lot of Henrik's artwork on the walls. You can purchase his artwork. We have his books there to peruse. It's so much more than a store. And I think if you're thinking about expanding into retail, you really need to consider all of these other facets. And like, what is your niche? Like, how can you stand out from the rest of the crowd?
Awesome. And so, Mariana, coming from obviously this like pure play, like digital, understanding that perspective, how do you see brands crushing it? I had a great opportunity to talk to these guys earlier, and I was like, I want to know, like, who's out there, who's really like doing a good job, and what are the new metrics? Because we all know that obviously people buy followers and there are bots, and it's like the whole thing is like way out of control, right? But yet it's still such a high converting, right? Being on digital is so high converting, and it's such an amazing touch point. So what are you seeing out there, and who's killing it? And please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mariana. I am the Senior Director of Brand Strategy at Hudson. We are a visual intelligence platform, so we focus on content performance on Instagram and work with Condé Nast across all of their publications. We also work with brands like Marc Jacobs, Just Fashion, Revolve, so definitely very content-oriented brands. And yeah, I mean, I think to answer the first part of that question, when it comes to KPIs, we've seen a lot of change in the past year with the Instagram algorithm, right? So a lot of brands were really relying on Instagram to reach consumers, and the algorithm just kind of, I like to say we live in a post-algorithm world where now there's really two KPIs that are important. The first is engagement, which Steff and Annalisa both touched on in the previous panel, and the second is distribution. So really, are you putting your brand out there in a way that resonates with your audience? Before the algorithm, at least for Instagram, you could just post as much as you wanted and it didn't matter if people liked it or not, people were gonna see it. Now it's really important to have content that they actually want to see, otherwise they're not gonna see anything from your brand. And then the second being distribution. A lot of the kind of growing up in this digital age is that content has been completely democratized. So we used to live in a world where a publisher or a retailer or a brand would tell you this is how the world is. And now everyone has a voice. And everyone's voice is just as important. So I like to think of everything as distribution, whether you're working with a publisher, whether you're working with a retail partner, whether you're working with an influencer, or just driving your community. These are all different points of distribution for your brand. And so it's important to have that. I would say that's the second KPI because you're reaching new audiences. So I would say that those are the two important KPIs in terms of who's doing digital and retail well. A couple brands come to mind, but those are really the ones that are driving loyalty first on digital, which is where you're getting scale. So really creating a brand that's relatable, and then that are in turn creating a physical experience that people want to engage with. They're not saying like, I need a store so I can sell my products. They're saying, what is the extension of the brand that all of these people are loyal to online? And what can I do that's gonna make them actually wanna come shop there? Because people can shop online. To your point, like, if you have this beautiful gallery experience where you're getting one-on-one interactions and it's someone you really trust, then yeah, I'm gonna like get off my couch and go shop there. And especially because in retail things are more expensive too. A lot of the time, you're not getting this cost savings that you'd get if you ordered on a big retailer. You really have to push it there. So brands that I see doing that well, Glossier, they really built their presence on social. They're super engaged with their community. They know exactly, like that relationship with their consumer is really dialed in. And then they have a store now in New York, and everything there's an experience. You're gonna want to Instagram yourself with this very Instagrammable brand in person. Another brand that's done it well is Revolve. They've pretty much built their entire presence around these kind of influencers on Instagram, and then once that really took off, they created locations. So Revolve in the Hamptons, Revolve at Coachella, they have a Revolve house in LA. When they're in the Hamptons, they also have a house here in New York. So they're making these exclusive experiences where people are gonna want to come and get their clothes there. It's kind of like the brand equivalent of the Vogue closet. You know, all these influencers can go to the Revolve house and pick out their outfit. So I think that really understanding what is it that your consumer wants from you, and then creating a physical space around that, and you can use platforms like Instagram or I mean, I feel like really mainly Instagram, let's be honest, to figure out what your consumer wants and try different things and see what really sticks, and then move forward with that and create a really cool branded experience around it.
Cool, so a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
So when it comes to executing a strategy, right? So it's like all this management, right? You have to produce the content, you have to decide, you know, what it's going to look like, write copy, you know, all of that kind of stuff, and all of it's either leading towards something, either it's just more engagement or it's a campaign or whatnot. What kinds of content are you finding, you know, consumers really like? You know, what are they most responsive to? Earlier we heard, you know, be really organic and really tell your story. You know, I've seen so many other kinds of information there. I was like, make sure it's edited. You know, what is it that, you know, you think is really driving KPIs, metrics, and, you know, how can brands go like, oh crap, now I'm gonna like change that thing I was gonna do tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's two different strategies. The first, it's kind of either you're the creator and you totally own your brand vision and you put that out there. I would say like W's a great example of a brand like that. They're very much a pull brand, like this is what we do. Or there's brands that are really focused on the community, and I think that community-driven brands, one of the benefits is that if you're a small company, then it's easier to do that. You don't have time to execute this whole creative social vision. So I think that one of the interesting things is that luxury is really used to telling the story and creating the story and changing what fashion is season to season. So I think it's been harder for them to adopt this democratization of content and be like, oh, our brand is actually also the stories that all of our consumers are telling too. And I think that they, you know, maybe that's a bit behind the times. I think it depends. So what I really like are the brands that really strive to create a community, because the more you invest in your community, the more people are going to invest back, and the more that they're going to, like, you can get just such beautiful content. I think that some of the best feeds that you might not know, but like some cool designers that have great feeds, their feeds might be 90% user-generated content. Like, that exists. So there's a lot you can do that if you're setting the tone of what you want, and then you're just creating your community, sharing their content, more people are gonna post about you, and you can tell your vision through your most loyal fans. You're gonna continue to drive loyalty. So I personally think that that's a really great way to go, especially for smaller brands. But then again, it really depends on, you know, your ethos and if that's something that is in alignment with you. But I think that for the purposes of today, that's a really nice one, and it's just people want to engage with you. Like, that's all they want. They want to be acknowledged. They're not posting about you because they don't care what you think. Like, let's be honest, they want you to like their content, they are hoping that you regram it, and if you can, you know, have that conversation with your consumers, that ultimately is gonna drive loyalty in the digital age.
Awesome. So, Susan, you know, what I think is really interesting is not only, I mean, you guys also you can buy product at the store. So, digital obviously plays a huge part in terms of probably how you evaluate the brands that you're bringing in. And, you know, so it's interesting, you're buying for brick and mortar, but you're clearly having a very digital experience as you consume these brands' content and kind of get to know them. So, from the perspective of a brand who's like pitching you and who's like, yo, Susan, buy my stuff, you know, what is it that is processing and filtering, and how are you experiencing this?
Well, our niche is, you know, we kind of have the wow factor. Like, you know, whenever I look at a new designer, I'm like, what is the craziest thing that you have, and you know, what is really going to be memorable, and people are going to walk into my store and they're going to be like, oh my god, I've never seen anything like this before. They're going to take pictures of themselves wearing it, and then they're going to remember it forever. You know, like that's kind of what I'm looking for. So if I do come across that on social media, or you know, even if I see, like, I do a lot through digital. Shout out to Vogue Runway, I always check that. Going to also runway shows, presentations, you know, you just have to be really like involved in the community, but also it could just be as simple as a cool looking customer comes in, shopping, they're wearing something really crazy, and you're like, what's that? I really, you know, and they happen to be the designer. You know, it comes from all different channels. And also, like, I visit the schools, I follow up and coming designers that I think are interesting. And I also collaborate with the buyer from Copenhagen. And so we kind of like share all these up and coming brands with each other. So yeah, it is very digital. It's a combination of digital and IRL. Yeah, I wanted to speak a bit about our own Instagram, because we do manage our Instagram accounts halfway from New York and also from Copenhagen. But just for user content, I think it's, you know, we post a lot. We do regrams of other brands that are like beautifully shot campaign images or whatnot. But I think whenever we have the most interaction with our posts is whenever we're just like, oh, you're wearing something cool today, let's do a look of the day, and like, you know, and shoot that. And it's very real, kind of behind the scenes, like this is what we're actually doing on day to day. And I think that's what's most honest, the most interesting as well for our customers. And so yeah, I think it's a wide range, you know, like you need to also post the product and show what you're offering, but I think just like showing that we're having fun doing what we're doing is also important.
So I think it's clear, like Instagram is the place, right? Everyone's like, it's all Instagram. Very clear Instagram. So Caroline, what is your perspective, having really experienced and kind of come from, you know, working with emerging market brands, you know, understanding both the digital and the print, you know, how the content is different, how brands today should be either pitching or creating content, you know, we need to make content, right? I mean, it's like that is it. We have to make clothes and products, but also a lot of content. So like, what are you seeing that's working today?
So what I find is WEZ have more of a niche audience than say Vogue or anything like that. You know, coming from the print side, again, you look at the runway trends, you'd see, you know, what was major moments, and you choose those dresses and whatever for our print pages. But we've noticed on the website, it just doesn't work at all. Anytime we say this is the trend for spring or this is what you should wear, more often than not, our audience does not agree with it. So we've noticed that it kind of has to be a bit of a trifecta thing. So not only is something maybe happening on the runway, but it's also something that we're seeing as a trend on Instagram. And whether it's, you know, kind of the bigger it girls, the Bales of the world wearing something, or even this, you know, group of influencers that I'm really interested in that have like the 30 to 60,000, you know, followers. Like those kind of girls, I think, are the ones that are really wearing the interesting new designers, or you know, really keyed into like a new trend. So if we're seeing it coming from like the street and from social and from the runway, that's when we usually post on it, and that's when we usually do a shopping story around it, and that's actually what really drives, you know, the engagement. And that's also when we notice a lot
you is gonna necessarily have an ROI or even like get on your radar.
Exactly, and I think what we noticed too is especially our younger leaders, they're not really interested in, the bigger bloggers, the Kiara Ferragnies of the world who are, Instagramming themselves in another pair of ripped jeans. They're definitely more interested in, these influencers who, again, have like 60K followers, they're posting selfies in the mirror, it's, you can see their pores, like they're not too refined, and I feel like those are the girls, like our audience specifically is more interested in that, which I think works well for young brands too, because a lot of the times those, they're not asking for a ton of money to post your stuff, they're genuinely interested in the brand, they want to rep the brand, I think they're a bit more easy to work with.
Awesome, I think that's really fascinating, especially because I know at least it comes up in a lot of my conversations with clients, where should I be putting my money, and how do I really get the most out of that experience? And I think really those microbloggers and people who have a community, I think that's really awesome to hear you say that, because sometimes for people it's like, is it really worth it to spend all that money? And it sounds like it's not, all the time, right?
And we also do, we'll constantly do like Instagram roundups of, just these, again, those like micro influencers wearing a certain brand or a certain look. And like the internet loves talking about the internet. So the minute we do a post on like girls on Instagram are doing this, it just like blows up and you see that engagement. Which is kind of interesting.
So an interesting question, guys, and I know in terms of rethinking where things are going, obviously there's this whole new world out there of AR and VR. It's like that's just gonna blow open like a whole new world of shopping, engagement, and how we experience fashion and that retail, and I'm so excited to kind of see where it moves. So given that every time it seems like we unlock a secret or a KPI or something, it seems like boom, there's a new change or there's something evolving. How does one really try to stay current? I'm a personal fan of the notion of attention arbitrage, right? You have to be where your customers are, you need to do the pop-up shops, you need to be active, you need to do that. But for a young brand, that can be quite a hefty investment to be the first to collaborate on virtual reality technology or something. So I guess it's more of an open question, but how do you guys kind of see the future of where this is heading? Because it used to be that Instagram was like the new thing, right? And like not everyone was on it, and it was much easier. Then Snapchat kind of came along, but now there's this whole new thing that's coming out, right? How do brands collaborate or harness or work with this as we go forward? Anybody?
I can speak. We have, because we do have like a traditional brick and mortar store, but there is an online presence. They operate that from Copenhagen, so I don't really have much to do with that. But there is this new kind of shopping trend that I've been noticing, where it's basically like live stream secret shopper, where you have someone on an app that has like a bunch of people watching, and they're going through the store and trying things on for the customers. Like we have, there's this new Chinese app that we've been working with, and just here and there, like they were fans and they found us, and I was like, okay, let's try this, why not? But we did have one event, and after the event, I was told that there were 17,000 people watching from China, and I'm like trying on clothes and having a good time, and they're like asking what sizes we have available and what it's made of, and so I feel like, I definitely do see more of that in the future. I don't know if there's one like that for the Americas yet. I'm just working with this, it's a fairly new Chinese brand, but I do feel like something like that where you get the live experience and you have someone there to be able to try it on and tell you what it feels like, but also to reach whereas we could probably only fit like 50 people in our store at one time, and now I have 17,000 people in my store at one time through this app. So I feel like I do see that as kind of a new, it's not really virtual reality, but it's
I've been hearing about that too. I've been hearing about the Chinese, they call them Daigao.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, it's like this whole new phenomenon of these personal shoppers. I mean, this technology, I think, is definitely a new one. They're using WeChat. And it's these personal shoppers who are from China, who are traveling around the world, and they're buying up, because obviously it's cheaper to buy a Chanel bag in Paris. in Shanghai. And so they're going around the world and they're shopping, and on their WeChat, they're blasting out to their thousands of followers, and they're like, hey, who wants to buy this? So there's definitely, I think, something exciting about the new Chinese market, and how we kind of start to engage with that, but I think apps like that are great. Are you using other apps? Like, have you guys used other social shopping apps and things like that?
No. We're kind of old school in a lot of ways. Like Henrik, he's like, if you want it, you buy it. It's kind of his method, but I Americanized it a little bit and I give like a little bit more customer service to our clients. Yeah, it's very, like he doesn't do celebrity endorsements. He's like, who cares if you want it, you buy it. So he's very old school Scandinavian in that way, but it's worked for him. So.
And Mariana, working for a digital company, I'm sure you guys are talking about always like what's happening or where are things going. Where do you kind of see the trends going?
Yeah, I definitely can appreciate the app that you were just talking about. I know Bottle Bar is a good example of a brand that's doing that. They have a whole team of personal shoppers. It's part of their customer service team. So if you're buying anything, you can talk to someone online and they'll actually put the jewelry on so that you can see like what size is it? Is it heavy? You can ask them questions. Obviously it's kind of hard with jewelry when you're looking at it online, and a lot of brands just show a picture and it's not really actually on someone's, and they have great success with that. So I'm definitely seeing that being used. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the shopping experience, I mean, I think that it's still going to be important to shop in person, but I think that it's probably going to be more of these curated, emerging brands, like things that you can't find online, maybe a brand that you've never tried on before, like Annalisa was saying that she has her favorite brand and she knows her size, and like that's it, she never has to go to the store again, she like gets it. But if you are in more of that discovery mindset, it's really difficult to bring that online. So I think that that's going to continue in retail. I think that what we're seeing now in terms of like retailers shutting down stores is just the brands that you can get anywhere. The brands that like, it doesn't matter, your size, like it doesn't matter if you go in person or not, you can probably find it cheaper online, and there isn't that like, again, there isn't that investment back to the consumer that's really going to get people to go and have that in-person experience. So I would say that things are probably going to get more and more curated, and the stakes are going to be just like so much higher, and you're going to have to really work to have something interesting and noteworthy if you're going to have a brick and mortar or a pop-up or something, but I think that those will really pay off. And then in terms of your consumer, just continuing to engage with them, because as brands, small brands, it's hard to do it all. We've heard that already tonight. But if you're engaged with your audience and your consumers that are there where you need to be, and they really personally like your brand, like the micro-influencer thing, I mean, I would even say micro-influencers as small as 5,000 followers. They have crazy engagement. And we've done a study on this. They're more trustworthy. They'll probably support you for no monetary compensation. There's just so much there that you can do, so much like organic upside in that community, that if you're engaging with them, you can bet that they're going to be there where you need to be talking about your brand.
Awesome. And I know we're running out of time, but I just want to ask one more question. There are all of these social shopping apps, right? So there's Spring, Alexa chimed in did that launch with Deloitte. I mean, there are apps, and it's not just about having a mobile app, but now you're having these little like online shopping apps. And as a brand, obviously it's like exciting to be in all these places. But what are your thoughts on like overdistribution? And kind of seeing a brand on too many places. Can a brand at these days be overexposed? Because it can be so easy, and with the barrier to market being so low, right? I mean, it's so easy to say, oh, I'm going to start a brand, and I'm going to, on Instagram and get going, and, there are all these apps and online shopping places these days where it's done on drop shipment, right? You don't have to really get bought anymore, right? In order better to have distribution. So as evaluators, right, of this kind of content, I'm really interested from like the editor perspective, like how do you evaluate over-distribution? Is there such a thing as over-distribution? And also from the buyer standpoint, yeah, how do you see that? You know, are you evaluating that? You know, what's going through your mind?
I'm gonna talk first. Well, yeah, I feel like I've been noticing like shopping trends and seeing which stores are closing, which stores are doing like very successful in Soho, and I feel like it either has to be, you know, something that can be offered very cheaply, you know, like some of these big box brands, or it's something that is more like niche, has a story, has like a little bit more heart to it, and people can really respond to that, has more quality. So I feel like, you know, those are the two kind of niches that are being, that are successful right now. And I do think, you know, if you do have over-distribution, but you can offer something cheaply, then you can also be successful in that way. But I don't know, I do think that there is something, like some of our brands have zero web presence at all. And there's something kind of cool about that too. Like, you know, you don't know every single thing, like you don't know what the designer had for breakfast. You know, it's just like a little more secret, but it's more of like you see someone else on the street wearing the same brand, and you're like it's part of a club in a way. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's important, especially when you have like Wolf and Badger opening up, you know, like all these places where it's like you can pay, right, to like have exposure. You know, I wonder, you know, what if the mindset is like, oh, that's so cool that they're in this new retail space, right? Or is it like, oh, like what stores are buying wholesale? You know what I mean? Like, is that something that's crossing your mind?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, wholesale still does provide a lot of exposure, specifically for the Henrik Vibskov brands. Like, there's a lot of our customers who see his collection in other stores that aren't necessarily like going to walk in my door because it's a little too like filed in there. but you know, they'll see the brand and they'll become loyal through other stores. So yeah, I don't know. Distribution does have its place, but I feel like with everything, it needs to be organic growth. Like, I think if you just blast out like immediately, you know, like a lot of exposure all at once, but there's nothing to back it up, then that's not going to have staying power. I think, you know, like you have a slow growth model is much more important.
I can agree more. I think slow and steady does win the race. I think especially, you know, like to take a brand like Gucci, obviously like so wildly successful, everyone's into that look right now, but I think there is, you know, a saturation point with that. I think also with, you know, you see small brands who do, you know, I think a lot about like a small jewelry brand who came out last year who did like one earring that everyone was obsessed with and everyone bought and everyone wore for that summer, and then I think everyone just kind of moved on with it. And so, you know, I think when you're building a brand, obviously so great that you had that moment and everyone bought that one thing, but you know, what do you do next? And you keep the momentum. So I do think there is something about, you know, being quite particular about, you know, where you're sold, how you know, speak to your audience about your brand, and yeah, grow slowly.
Awesome. All right, guys. Any questions? Oh yeah, please.
I think you can probably look at oversaturation and that issue as like an engagement issue. So if you're, you know, if you think about content on social, like if someone like it, that's your engagement. When your brand's out there to be purchased, if they buy it, that's the engagement you're looking for. And I think it's very similar in the sense that if you're just available everywhere and people know they're going to have another opportunity to buy you, they don't have to make that decision right now, then that's probably when it's a negative thing. So making sure that you balance there and that like you're in places where people like that they know like, oh, this is my opportunity to purchase that. When it comes to apps, like it doesn't really work, like shopping apps. I don't know if we've ever seen it, like Spring loves Spring, but they have a website now. It doesn't work when it's just an app. So I think like, and again, it's because those items are, they're available everywhere. There's no exclusivity to that experience. So So I think it's really important to make sure that you're not over distributing to the point of people no longer having that sense of urgency to act on your brand.
Great. All right, guys, we went a little over time. Yes, questions? You in the back.
So with the plight of AI and AR community, like so even the CEO of eBay has said that they're adopting an AI strategy. Do you think that as far as would it be stronger or more important to have your AI strategy deal more to personalization or client behavior?
Ooh, okay, so that question was about, AI strategy. I'm used to AI strategy, and it's better to customize that for personalization
Or client behavior.
or client behavior. Interesting. Mariana, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like that's not my expertise. I'm not
In the technology?
Yeah, so I don't know if
I mean, I'll give my 2 cents. I think that on the side of personalization, I think as a brand, it's very difficult to keep up with personalization. So if you're on the side of manufacturing and production and you're trying to customize shit, you're going to really find yourself in a bind, right? You're going to be in a real pickle. So if you're looking to do something that's like, introducing technology but using it in a way that's actually going to help you as the brand owner, right, then I would say understanding consumer behavior that allows you to produce the products that your customers are looking for on a larger scale, right? But doing something that's, hyper personalized, unless you own the factory, right, and unless you can actually run these garments through, it's a little bit more difficult. It sounds easy. There's a brand out there called One Atelier that just launched here, in New York, I want to say maybe about a year and a half ago, and they're doing all this personalization. However, they've limited the assortment to which you can personalize. So it's saying, hey, you can personalize this, but only these things can you really personalize, right? So even if you want to do personalization, you've got to limit yourself, otherwise you're just shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, actually, I think of an example in the beauty industry that I think is really great. That's kind of a nice middle ground. Have you guys heard of Colorpop Cosmetics?
Yes.
Sure you have? Okay, awesome. So they own their factories, right? So it's literally all just there in their office. They're one of our customers who were out there last week. It's very cool. And so they're able to respond to trends really quickly because of that. So if there's a color big on Instagram, they can literally just walk over to their product development and walks over, when is this color coming out? And they can make makeup that quickly. And I think that that's actually a really, they're constantly selling out of things. That's a really good way to look at it because you're meeting them halfway there. You're not saying you tell us what you want, but you're saying, oh, we heard you. Let's create something around that, and they're able to do it quickly in a way that's still them being consumers. Because people want to be told what to buy at the end of the day. So, and again, it creates that sense of urgency. They also have a really nice, they can tell the story around it, to your point, because they own the facility. So they can really own that back to front. It feels very transparent. It doesn't feel like fast fashion-y, there's that personal connection. They had a great, one of the first times they sold out, they had a really bad backlash from their consumers on it, and they were actually able to take to social and use their Snapchat to show everyone working overtime in their office to ship out the products, to create the products, and it was able to turn it into a really positive experience. So I think when you have that ability, it can be quite cool, but again, it's logistically difficult, so.
Any other questions?
Quick question.
Yes.
So, given the current climate politically and social media content, are there any rules don't politicize your content or do so because it will help you form a community? Don't participate in hashtag whatever day, stuff like that.
So the question is, do you politicize your content and make it personal and reflect your beliefs through your Instagram accounts?
Yes, I think that this is a political time, and if you don't have something to say, then are you living in La La Land? I actually think it's a negative thing. We have seen that this year, the top performing content across all of our customers has been especially around the Women's March and women's rights, that is the top engaging content. So I think if something like that's happening and you're posting about a dress and everyone's upset about something else, it's probably a negative interaction. So I would definitely say if you don't want to engage, don't engage, but don't be posting other things. And that people, like, they want to know your brand's point of view, and it's another loyalty driver. But I'm curious, you guys, too.
Well, we're Scandinavian-based company, so I don't really drag that much into it, just because it's like different viewpoints from all over the world. But yeah, we have just chosen to not. I mean, there's been like a little touches here and there on social media about politics, but I feel like if we were based here, it would be a lot more obvious that we just to speak up.
I think we should as well. I mean, at W, leading up to the election, we, as a staff, actively made the decision to become political. It's not something W had ever even dealt with in the past, and we found that our audience wanted that. Our top engaging content was around Women's March. We did portraits of the women very much involved in that movement. It just everything went through the roof. We also have done, a lot of videos recently around, I'm an immigrant and women's rights, and the engagement there has been amazing as well. We also, on one recent day, decided to post, I think it was a day after the Women's March, someone did decide to post like a shopping related story, and I think like 300 people clicked on it, like no one, so our audience is very clear in saying you want absolutely nothing to do with shopping content and fashion, when something very important is happening.
That's a great question. Another question, guys? Maybe we have time for one more, and then I think everyone wants to get the wine. So, one more question. Yes.
Can you just give some examples of some brands that you were saying do a good job investing in communities and how they're doing that?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I would say Glossier first and foremost. I think everyone knows them. There's Millennial Pink these days, which is also known as Glossier Pink. So they do a really great job because they have different tiers of influencers. I think the brands that we see do it best. They don't just have a one-size-fits-all policy. They're not like, oh, we don't pay anyone, so we're only going to work with these people, or oh, we only pay people. We don't give our product away for free, so we're going to ignore everyone else. But they look at everyone individually, and they find people for this size influencer, this is the type of way that we want to engage with them. For a bigger influencer, we're going to do something different. So they have multi-tiered strategies. And I think one of the biggest things is they don't ignore anyone. So even if you have 500 followers, they're gonna engage with you. And I think that that's really important because it takes loyalty from off of digital into the real world. That person that's liking every single post that you put up and has 500 followers is gonna talk about you when someone says, what's the last thing you purchased? And they're gonna rave about you. So really giving attention to their full community and in different ways depending on the size. So I would say that that's the first one that comes to mind. Let me think. I would say, Revolve is a classic one too, but they just take a very different approach, which is just creating community FOMO. Their target demographic likes to party, likes to wear cute clothes, likes to drink, likes to travel, loves these influencers, and they just create this whole life that they wish that they were at, and then continue to show that. So it's engaging their audience. They also talk the same way that their audience does, so they're not gonna come to you with they're gonna come to you with abbreviations and say things like Vogue. Because that's how their audience talks. So really being at the same level and treating them like a friend. So really not creating boundaries there. Again, I would say ColourPop, as I gave that example, is a good one. So I think just the more that you can, I I wish I had more off the top of my head right now, but the more that you can engage with your consumer, another good one is JBrand, actually. JBrand does a great job because most of their content is actually user-generated content. And if you look at their feed, it doesn't look like it's user-generated content because that's how well they've taught their audience what their brand looks like. So they have so much just coming in all the time. They just can take their pick of it. So they're another one that I would look into. So yeah, I think that the more you're just engaging with them, getting to know them, putting content that's relevant to them. One big thing is a lot of brands think that you need to do everything. That Instagram's not a place to be niche, but niche brands do better. You don't have to be every single pillar of your brand on every single channel. So figure out what your audience wants from you on Instagram and keep doing that. Like, it doesn't matter that you also have an opinion on, interior design and maybe you have something about that on your website. If people on Instagram don't care about it, don't force feed it. So listen to them too when it comes to your content creation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, my I think this concludes our evenings. May I invite you to some.
I know, I'm like, I was waiting to go to the